Awesome, Dave. We're live. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Glad to be back.
So Dave, I think we had you on the show maybe a year or so ago. I'll link to it in the show notes and everything. For those who don't know you and what you're doing or follow you on LinkedIn, tell us a bit about your background, how you got here.
Cool. Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me back. I'm glad the first time was a blast. It was a lot of fun, and the podcast is awesome. I love it. So
As a little tidbit, we got so much good feedback on that episode. I still get people who message me about that episode, and it was easily a year or 18 months ago. So anyways,
yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah, absolutely.
Evergreen content for you there, Dave.
I know. I still have people hit me up like, "Hey, I heard you on the podcast." I'm like, sweet. So, but yeah, so my background, I was in college, Middle Eastern Studies, Arabic major, is going to go work, for the government in some agency, who knows. And I just kind of got to the end of my bachelor's degree, and I was like, you know what? I don't know anything about money. I know zero. I grew up in like normal middle class home, like we did okay, but that was pretty much it. I didn't know anything about it. And so I was like, okay, well, first, before I work for the government, I'm going to go figure out money. So I just got a job at Fidelity Investments, and I viewed it as like a paid apprenticeship. Like they paid me for me to learn everything I wanted to learn. It was great. It was fantastic. So during that process, I just found, like, number one, I really like this and I get it. Like it clicks in my mind. And number two, the vast majority of people are the opposite of me. They don't like it and it doesn't click. And there's not enough, like there's so much need for it. And so I said, hey, you know what? This is a career for me. So I did traditional wealth management after Fidelity, managing millions of dollars for, people getting into retirement and everything. And I just hit a point where I said, I want to help people that were like me, that were young, get them a solid start so that they know what trajectory they're on. And they, 30 years of strategy, like there's so much potential locked up in that, like multiple millions of dollars that people can unlock by just having a strategy early on. So yeah, I built my own coaching practice, and here we are.
Well, yeah, thanks for that background. That's awesome. One thing that's always stuck out with me and your story is some of the pivot switches that you made in your career. It's like Arabic studies, go work for the government. Oh, I'm going to go work for Fidelity, which is complete opposite. But then you said something interesting that I've thought about and loved that in your story is you realize all the financial planners are going after the 60-year-old. The 60-year-old who's got a bunch of money, they sold their business, they've been putting money away for 30 years, they did everything right, and they want to manage their money. Well, the problem is you're kind of fighting over this kind of limited market. And what you said is, how do I take this skill set and apply it to someone who's 30 years younger? And that's actually where you get the 30 years of compounding effect, because you probably ran into a lot of people in their 60s that made all the mistakes that they should have made earlier on. But just the way the structure of financial planning is and the incentives, it's like, oh, you only work with rich people, because someone who's not rich yet, it doesn't work. And I'll give you an example. I've gone through 5 CPAs in 12 years since graduating from college. And the reason is because my first business, sucked. It went out of business. And anyways, but like my businesses have progressively gotten better and better and better. But you at the beginning, you don't get any time from your CPA, and the tax planning is like, well, I can't tax plan in April. It's too late. Like I needed this call back in October or November. And so part of it is I did a better job at like working with CPAs. And part of it is I just got more important to CPAs, and now they take my calls, So kind of with that in mind, one of the things that I thought was interesting, and you and I've kind of jammed a lot about, and I see you as more of an entrepreneur who's a financial planner rather than a financial planner who has a business. With a lot of questions that I get from listeners, this is one of the most common ones, is we have a lot of listeners who are trying to make the switch from W-2 to business owner, or W-2 to entrepreneur. You've worked with hundreds and hundreds of families and couples and individuals working with their money. What are some examples that you've seen that people do right in trying to get the financial freedom and then make the switch to take some risks? And what do you see some things that they do wrong in making that switch, or not ever being able to make that switch?
Yeah, such a good question. I mean, what's so interesting about that actually is yesterday I had somebody call me and they're like, hey, we haven't talked in a while, but I know you work with, people with high income, and I want to know what they're doing. Like, what are they investing in? What are they spending their time on? And they're like, what are the people that are earning 6-7 figures that you're working with? What do they do? Like, how do I get there? And the
Maybe
answer,
answer that question. Maybe answer that question first before you answer mine. That's a better question.
the answer was, it was like immediate. It's like they own a business. That's it. Like everything else that's investing is investing, and investing is like almost by definition, it's passive. But if you're an active investor, it's less of investing and more of a business. And so it's like, if you're actively engaged in creating a venture and you're putting your own time in and you're leveraging your skill, that's a business, whether it's in real estate, whether it's in, buying and flipping businesses or starting businesses and selling them or whatever it is, that's a business. And so the definition is like a lot more broad than people might realize. But if you want to crack the ceiling on income and wealth, like a business is the answer. Like it is the answer. So I just had to add that. I just thought it was so interesting yesterday. In terms of your question, so I've definitely seen a bunch of examples both ways. What it comes down to is the ones that are successful have a solid personal finance foundation. Like they've taken care of the ABCs of finance, so to speak. And so it allows them to take bigger risks, right? Make bigger bets, because even if it fails, they still have a solid foundation they're falling back on. The ones that have failed and the ones that don't do well, like, entrepreneurship is hard, so there's failure, like you said, your first one, it's just, that is how it is. And so without that foundation, when the failure comes, it can be devastating. And so it really does start with creating that foundation. So for example, I'll give you one. So I had somebody that they started a business. Okay. And this is it's a fairly low overhead business. It's in the services. Okay. And you're kind of affiliated with a group. So you kind of join in and you're 1099 and right, but it's your own business. And they sunk in so much money and they got into a ton of debt just to make it work. And they couldn't make the business work. Okay. So what happened is they ended up wrapping that up, right? They had to, they shut it down, went and got a normal job, but then they had a ton of credit card debt. They had a HELOC that was out against their, against their house. So they had even more debt than just their mortgage. And they were basically starting from scratch. Their credit score had tanked, and they were just like, okay, I'm going to go W-2 for a while and earn some money to figure this out. And it really was, the building blocks of finances that weren't quite there for them to take that risk. And that's okay. Everybody's got to learn at their own time. Like there's like all love for that person, right? Because it's hard. Okay. But with those building blocks in place, even a failure like that, they have something to fall back on and then build off of, for the next thing that they try.
You're not starting from ground zero again.
Not starting from ground zero, because that can be a hard hole to dig out of, and not impossible. Like I know a lot of people that are very wealthy that, declare bankruptcy at one point, like that's not uncommon. And I know several people like that, but it is a harder hole to climb out of. And psychologically and emotionally, it's very difficult, especially on a marriage and all of that. So,
You mentioned something in there, Dave, about building blocks. And so this is not a one size fits all discussion. This is more to, for listeners to kind of get their, the wheels churning in their brains to figure out how they can kind of step back their way into some of their goals. And inevitably goals typically fall in line with financial goals, because you're not going to hit your goals without some kind of financial goals too. Mm-hmm. You said building blocks. So this isn't a one size fits all, but what are some of the building blocks? Is it that they have other income that's coming in while they're taking a bigger risk? Is it they've got money set aside, that's in the 401k that they don't want to touch? What are some of these building blocks that you've seen that have worked well for people?
Yeah. So I'll name a couple of them. There's no specific order here, right? But they have low consumer debt, I should say. And one of the reasons that I think, the trend I'm seeing as to why that's important is because they've got their lifestyle under control and it gives them flexibility, right? So if you're spending money like crazy, right, and you don't really have any rhyme or reason to what you're doing, but you're not really building up any capital to do anything with, then all of a sudden when you don't have an income, like if you go start a business or you go buy one, like your runway is a lot shorter, right? Like maybe you can go 3 months before you have to recoup all your income, before you're just out of money because your lifestyle spending is so high. And so that's one common trait I've seen among those that have been successful in making that leap, is they control their living expenses. Like it's pretty basic. It's not like they're living on rice and beans, but they know their numbers. How much am I spending? What's absolutely essential? And what could I get away with? You know, if I didn't have income for a while I'm building up, right? Or something like that. So low consumer debt and like a control on what money is going out. That's one thing. A second thing is, especially if they're married, like they've got to be on the same page, right? Together. Cool.
Let my dog in. He got interrupted by the hound. Sorry, y'all. So spouses being on the same page. Talk a little bit about that, because this is actually something I tell a lot of people about, and I don't think enough conversations are happening around this and what that looks like. Because usually when you leave a W-2 and you either buy a business or start your own business or do something that is out of that realm, you're in 99% of the time your income is going to go down.
Yep.
What does that mean? Well, Disney World's not on the table, right? Like you kind of have to figure what's necessary and get rid of the stuff that isn't. So talk a little bit about that and how those conversations have gone poorly or well, or you've kind of seen those within other relationships.
Yeah, it's so important to be dialed in on the same page and like understand your values together, right? Because what has happened in the bad cases, you've probably seen this, maybe even experienced it. I probably have to some extent as well with my wife in my own ventures, where it's like maybe we're not totally on the same page and we kind of want different things and we just don't understand each other. So in some of the poor cases, it can build a lot of resentment. Because like you said, income's most likely going to go down at the beginning. Like that's just how it is. And so if it goes down and you have to cut out Disneyland, or you have to sell the nicer car and maybe downgrade, right? Or you can't quite build the new house you were wanting to build, or you have to watch expenses a lot more than normal, and the spouse isn't on board with that, either there's a lot of fight, like they say things and there's like a lot of conflict, or they don't say anything and there's just this resentment that builds up. And if things don't work out, that resentment sticks around and it intensifies. Like that's just how it is, right? It's like, oh shoot, we went through all of that and now we're even in a worse spot. And I never wanted you to start a business anyways, or I never wanted you to buy that anyway. I was never on board. And it's like, wait, what? So, yeah. And that can happen on both sides too, right? Either spouse, nobody's immune to that. And so really understanding like, okay, what do we value in our life? Is it the new house? Is it the fancy cars? If it is, maybe we should keep our high paying job, right? And maybe wait before we take a leap. But if we have different values, like we want autonomy over our time and we want flexibility, right? Even if we don't have all the income in the world, especially at the beginning, if we value those things more and we can get on the same page as spouses about that, then it's like, okay, if we take this leap, we are leaning into our values that we're both aligned on, and whatever happens, happens, but we're both in it, like 100%, we're all in on this thing. And it's that unity, like that creates momentum. It reduces friction. So there's not always problems like every month when the income drops a little bit. It's not like there's friction. It's just like, okay, that's all right. Let's figure this out. So that spousal relationship is so important, and aligning on values there is it's just huge.
And I think those conversations need to start very early on. You know, I'm talking years in advance before someone takes this leap. Because if you haven't had these conversations, you're probably not building the foundation that allows you to then jump off. Something just totally random. I went to lunch with two super successful entrepreneurs last week, two friends of mine. They didn't know each other. We all connected and we're sitting there eating, and naturally the conversation ended up, we started talking about our spouses, and these two, what was interesting about them, they're incredibly successful. But their spouses do not care whether they drive like a brand new car or a 10-year-old car. And, you know, this doesn't have to be the case. This isn't like, you know, you can't do entrepreneurship if you like nice cars, but it's, you know, both of them have made millions and lost millions in a month, you know, like way up and way down different times. and it didn't impact their spouse's view on things. And I'm saying, like, that's pretty difficult to do. And I would say that's probably difficult for me. It's difficult for most people. But what's important there is, that's an extreme version, but it's also like worked well for them. But they've obviously had a lot of questions around finances and what's important, what's not important. And if we need to cut things out, we need to do that. So.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, it takes time to build into that. And it takes, like, for both to really buy in, you have to have a very open relationship. All marriages do, frankly, if you want to succeed, right? And so this
is marital advice from Dave and Ryan 101.
So it's like, you have to be really open and like be willing to have those hard conversations. Because if one is not all the way in, it's not going to be good, or at least has the potential to not be good.
And what I have seen, for the most part, in working with a lot of entrepreneurs and searchers or whoever, is when you don't have those conversations, you think you can get your business up and running in 3 months, and you can't. You just can't. You need longer than 3 months. You probably need longer than 12 months. Usually, in most entrepreneurs that I've talked to, and I've talked to dozens who've gone from W-2 to successful entrepreneur, and dozens who haven't done it successfully. And on average, it seems like it's about 2 years, Dave, before you kind of like, you're doing really well with your W-2, it drops way down and it slowly trickles up. It doesn't jump way back up, but it's usually about a 2-year valley. And I don't blame anybody for not wanting to go through that valley. It's the valley of the shadow of death. It's not very fun.
No, it's brutal.
Yeah, it is brutal, and you're cutting back in all sorts of areas, and there's tough conversations to have, but you should expect a 2-year. And if it happens in 12 months, great. You just have that much more of a buffer to protect yourself from.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But yeah, you have to be prepared for the long haul. It's interesting. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to change the topic, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's interesting when you talk about this, because, this part of the financial foundation, like being aligned with your spouse, it also works like if you're single, right? Like being aligned with your highest values. Like, what is it that you actually want? And if there's something that you want so badly, then you're willing to go through a lot of pain and difficulty to make it happen, And so at different points in my business, I haven't had the highest income, but I was also extremely happy and fulfilled. And it didn't bother me that, I couldn't go get my vacation home yet. You know what I mean? Like, we were happy, simple, because like I was doing something, spending all my energy and time on something that fully aligned with my values. And I still do. Like, I work on that actively, and it makes those periods, that valley that you talk about, it makes it so much more bearable for both people, right? For both spouses. It's like, no, this is what's important to us, and you just keep cruising. So
I think that's super important. I've talked to 3 entrepreneurs in the last 2 weeks, Dave, who they're looking to sell their businesses. And what's interesting there is they have wonderful businesses. And the question is, well, why sell, right? Why do you want to sell this business? And they said, well, in order for me to take this business to the next level, I would need to hire people. I need to put in more than 20 hours a week. I need to put in 40 hours. I need to build out an office. And that's not the lifestyle I'm looking for. So in that sense, they actually, they felt guilty that they didn't want to grow, get big, like everything in America. But they actually said, I'm very aware of what I want. And once I was like, yeah, that's actually pretty common. It's okay to not want to hire a team and go huge. They're like, oh, okay, other people do that? I'm like, yeah, they go lifestyle first, right? So they're building their business around their lifestyle. It supports their lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So you've got kind of the building blocks of the financial side. You need that foundation. You've got spousal support. Anything you've seen else that, might make it so you're a winner as you make that switch?
Yeah. So I would say, like, how you position your capital in advance is really, really important. And what I mean by that is, especially when we're W-2, it's the common advice is like, contribute to your 401k, right? Get the match, put in your retirement accounts, whether you're getting a tax deduction or it's going in Roth, like that's the smart move. And don't get me wrong, I like retirement accounts. Like, I have them.
You're a financial planner. Yes.
I'm a financial planner. It'd be like blasphemous, right? But to be honest, retirement accounts are built for one type of investment vehicle primarily, which is stocks, right? There's nothing wrong with that, okay? But in exchange for these tax benefits, you're you're giving up some flexibility with that money, right?
Yeah,
And
you're,
so,
you're tying it up so you hit 59 or 60 or something like that, right?
yeah. And so it could be a part, right? Like I have clients, it's like, yeah, absolutely put money in the 401k. Others, it's like, you should probably stop putting money in there because your goals ultimately are this way. Like you want to go buy a business. It's like, okay, well, you need access to cash then. So stop putting in $20,000 a year to your 401k and keep that, more or less liquid and accessible so that you can, when you find the right deal or you have the right opportunity, you can jump on it. So like positioning capital, retirement accounts are not the answer for everybody. They are a vehicle, but it's not like, God's gift to mankind for future financial wealth. You know what I mean? And so it's like, just be smart about where you're positioning that. And in addition to that, if you take care of your consumer debt, then you have the opportunity to get access to other capital, right? You can. So let me tell you what I did. Can I just share exactly what I did when I started my business?
Absolutely. That'd be great.
So the first thing that I did was I looked at all of our expenses and I boiled down to the absolute bare minimum fixed costs for living. And I found that number, and I don't even know what number that is now, but it had the mortgage, utilities, groceries, like what is it that we just need to live? And I took that number and I was like, okay, let's just say it was like 4,000 a month. I can't remember it now. So, okay, it's $4,000 a month. Okay, that's reasonable. So then I looked at my house, and at that time, I think in my house, I had probably, I don't know, like maybe like $100,000 of equity, let's say, that I could tap into. So I'm like, okay, well, if all else fails, I could still sell the house and we'd have 100K, and that would keep us going for another 2 years. Does that make sense? Like $48,000 a year in
48
costs.
yeah.
Boom. So 100,000 in my house. If worse came to worse, and I was on the cusp, I could sell our house and we could still live, right? And then I had my retirement accounts. I had other investment accounts. So I basically added up all of my capital or access to capital. And I said, what's my run rate? How long could I go with zero income? And for me, it ended up being like 2.5 years between retirement accounts and home equity and other stuff. And so then I had to ask myself, can I make something successful in 2.5 years? And to like earn $1 of income. Where again, we're talking like 2.5 years of zero income. Can I figure something out? If I can't, I shouldn't be an entrepreneur. And I should just go get a job, right? So I added up all my capital against my absolute lowest expenses. And I said, okay, that's it, right? And during that time, right before I quit, I went out and I got a HELOC on my house when I still had a paycheck.
Because you needed income. Yes.
I needed income, W-2 verification, right? So I go and I maxed out a HELOC on my house. And then I went and I raised the limit on all my credit cards and I got a couple more. I'm like, this is access to capital. Now I'm not going to over leverage myself because I have the assets to back it up, but credit can float me for a while, right? Until it comes due. But I didn't ever take on more debt than I had capital to pay off if I needed to, right? So I wasn't like digging myself a hole, but I was floating it. With my retirement accounts, I had a Roth IRA. I took money out. You can take out your contributions without any penalty or any tax. The growth stays in there. If you take that out, it's penalized in tax. Your contributions you can take out at any time. So it got to the point where like, oh yeah, I'll tap into that. Like I need 10K. So I took 10K from my Roth, boom. From my IRAs, my traditional IRAs, you can take out money. This is not, the IRS doesn't really like it.
This is not financial planning advice, by the way. This is one example. So
exactly. So the IRS doesn't really like you to look at it this way, but you can do what's called a 60-day rollover. Okay, and essentially that just means that you can take cash out of an IRA, and as long as you put it back within 60 days, there's no taxes and no penalty. Okay, and the reason they had this is like you move your IRA from one custodian to another, like Fidelity to Vanguard, and sometimes they mail the check. It takes time. So if I needed cash, you can do that once every rolling year. Okay, every calendar year or every 52 weeks you can do that. So I go and I tapped into my IRA when I needed cash, and I held on to it, and then 60 days later I'd go and I'd pay it back
with no penalty.
No penalty. And one time I paid it back by taking out money from my wife's IRA. Okay. So, because I was just floating, right? I was floating money. Because I'm like, if I can hold on long enough, I know I can be successful. And sure enough, like the revenue started picking up. I started just paying all that back, right? I took a HELOC then and paid off the other IRA, but then I just paid back the HELOC. And then my cash flow was going. Okay. So I never took out more debt or over leveraged myself beyond the assets I had, but I put capital in the right spots, and then I created access to cash that would get me over a hump. And if all else failed and I ran out of money and I sold my house, then I'd be, like 30 years old with no assets, and I'd still be in the top 50% of my age group, because everybody has student loans and I didn't.
So, well, first off, Dave, thanks for kind of explaining that story, because you kind of opened up a lot. You're vulnerable there. What's so interesting is my example, and I've never told my example of kind of making the switch, was almost identical to that. We had, I want to say, just shy of 2.5 years of runway. I did the exact same thing, bare minimum of like, okay, this is what I need to do for my mortgage. I didn't have a car payment. This is like bare minimum, putting food on the table for my kids. My kids are young. They don't know if I'm rich or poor. They don't care, right?
Yeah.
They just know if I'm jumping on the trampoline with them. And I said the same thing. It was like just shy of 2.5 years. So I was like, okay, if I can't make money in 2 years, I literally should not be doing this. And I told my wife that. And I said, this is a job. This is a hard plug. Like, we are pulling this out. And if this doesn't work, like, okay, we're going back into the workforce and do what we need to do. I pulled money out of the IRA. I had some lines of credit with other businesses that I made sure I had access to, that I could tap into if I needed to.
Yep.
All the things that you said were almost identical to what you did. And the psychology of it too, Dave, is month 1, you're all excited. Month 2, you're pretty excited. Month 5, like, crap, I haven't made any money yet. Like, this is still going down, right? Anytime something goes down, it's not very fun, right?
No.
There's a psychology effect that isn't just there. Even though I've got 2.5 years, the psychology effect is real. It can really impact you. And so going through these exercises, it's almost more for like knowledge, but also like you have to put your brain through these things, because you're going to want to pull the plug like five months in. I can't take this anymore. Your spouse can't take it anymore. I'm going to go back and get a job. And I think I was like 18 months in before I was like, I feel comfortable enough that I don't feel the urge to like dust off my resume and go get a job.
Yeah, totally. Well, I love that. It's so funny that they're so similar, but it really is like the ups and downs, especially in that first little bit, are so intense. Like emotionally was the hardest part. Like financially, it's like whatever, but emotionally, it was hard. Like,
yeah. And you sort of you can feel down in the dumps. Like truly you feel down in the dumps. You're like, oh, I'm like doing a disservice to my family. Like, I'm not supporting them. Like I'm supposed to be the breadwinner here. I'm supposed to be doing X, Y, and Z, and you're not. And you could feel like crap sometimes. You feel miserable.
If I've ever been through depression, it was then, for sure.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's brutal. So you really do have to prepare your psyche. Like you have to understand like what's the worst that can happen.
Well, when you have a paycheck and you have surplus and you're constantly putting towards your 401k and it's going up because, from 2010 to 2020, it never went down. Like all these things, you just kind of have this thing like, well, everything's green and it always goes up. Well, all of a sudden it hits red month over month, and it's not very fun. Dave, we could talk for hours on this. I know you don't have hours. One of the reasons also I reached out to you, Dave, is you have launched kind of a community and a course. And I had the fortunate benefit of being part of some of your founding members, one of your first people that went through your course. And I say course loosely. This is different than any course I've ever been to. It's incredibly thorough. It covers all these different topics of personal finance, from, crypto strategies all the way through, you name it, 401ks to everything. Right. And one thing that I thought was really important is finding out what the goals and the whys and why you're doing certain things. So I wanted to put a plug in for that, because I think is incredible, and you're getting access to something that typically costs tens of thousands of dollars. Tell us a little bit about your course, what it's like. Oh, and one thing that I love about it, David, is kind of like a buffet. You don't have to consume it from A to Z. I've gone through and just pulled out little sections here, little sections there that I've liked. But tell us a little bit about what you've been working on. And this is not something you put together in 3 days. This is something you've been working on for years, and it's taken you months and months to put this together. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it really has been a marathon. And what I wanted to do is really take all of my knowledge around all these different topics and how I work with my clients one-on-one, and kind of encapsulate that in a format where anybody can do it at a fraction of the cost, right? They can kind of DIY their own plan. And it's not like like you said, I'm not a financial advisor that owns my own business. I'm an entrepreneur that happens to do financial planning. So it's not your typical, like, contribute 10% to your Roth 401k and stay out of debt, right? It really is like, you can build your own path to financial freedom using any of the tools available. 401ks, real estate, business, all on the table. And so the interesting thing though about personal finance is you can never stop learning. Like, there's so much to know that you can just get lost in like pages of Google results, right? And Investopedia. And so I wanted to create something, and I've started courses just like you. I've started courses that I never finish, right?
Yeah.
Like,
What do they say? 98% of courses, I don't know, I made that up, you never finish, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and then you just feel like, oh, well, that was a waste, right? I didn't get my result. So I've structured this in a way where it's like, hey, look, I'm going to take you where you are and help you get clarity on your values and your goals. That's like foundational. And then, like you said, it's a buffet. It's like, what do you need help with right now? There's some foundational principles you need. And then, but beyond that, it's like, what do you need right now? What's relevant to you? Do you need to figure out taxes? Then you come here and it has everything you could learn about taxes, just, in itty bitty increments. And you can just go watch a 5-minute video and get your answer to your question, right? So it's not like an A to Z, consume everything. It really is like, what do you need right now to take the next step towards financial freedom? Go find the answer and then go implement it. And I'm happy, like, if people don't see 100% of it, that makes me happy, because it probably means that they've taken what they needed and they've gone and done something with it, other than just
Consume,
watch everything and never act. So that's kind of how it's structured, and everybody's plan is unique, like.
Well, one of the things along those same things, I remember first talking to you, Dave, really early on, a couple of years ago. We were just talking about random things and random goals, and mostly it's like, oh, what do you want to do when you retire? This and that. I'm like, dude, I'm so far away from retirement. I may not make it there, like I've got good knees now. What do I want to do now? And I think that's important. Is I thought your curriculum and your program was helpful to understand, like, I have stuff I want to do now with my kids at this age, rather than I'm not going to wait till I'm 65, because when I'm 65, I'm not going to be jumping off waterfalls. And like, I'm going to be like the riverboat cruise down whatever river in Europe, I'm not going to be doing stuff that I want to do now. And I thought that was really cool. Is, well, what do you want to do now too? We don't need to suppress the now to like also build financial independence and build the things that you want to build down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. Like, the traditional financial advice that's given out there is you save early, save often, and then you're going to have a big pile of money at the end of the rainbow. Okay. When you retire. And the bottom line is, like, just like you said, life rarely is what we plan it to be. Nobody knows what you're going to be like, what your family is going to be like, who you are as a person in 30 years, much less 10 years. And so it really is about, what is the life you want now? And let's just make you have that life forever, and structure things that way, because the pot at the end of the rainbow is just, it's not there. Like, you're going to get there at the end of the rainbow and there's not going to be the pot of gold. You might have money, but you're not going to have like fulfillment in life. So it's all structured around fulfillment in life first, fiscal responsibility second, so you can maintain that, that lifestyle that you want.
It's not a pure YOLO.
It's not pure YOLO. That's right. It's not pure YOLO, and it's not pure like rice and beans. It's like balance. Let's work a little and play a little for our whole life.
It's FIRE. It's, financial independence, retire early, but like with a lot of fun, like we're gonna play with fire. It's fun. Dave, where can people learn more about the course, learn more about you, the whole 9 yards?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn all the time. You can check me out, Dave Lowell. I drop content there all the time. I'll give you a link. So I wanted to give you and your listeners a special deal here on this course that I'm just putting out there. So they can get a huge discount on the retail price of the course. So I'll give you that link. You can put it in the show notes or whatever. and share that with your listeners, because I know you have a really engaged audience, and if people are engaged, they're gonna make good change happen, so I want to reward it. So I'll leave that link. I'll give that to you guys, and then hit me up on LinkedIn with any questions. I'm always out there.
Well, awesome. Thanks, Dave. We'll link to that in the show notes, and appreciate offering a huge discount to listeners out there. Thanks for your time, Dave.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.